Armed with the knowledge of the state of the Van der Linde gang in the first Red Dead Redemption, we knew going into Red Dead Redemption 2 as its prequel, it was going to present a not-so-happy story about how the fibre of the gang crumbles apart, and how the characters that it portrays get to where they are in the 2010 title. But none could have predicted just how powerful some of that stuff would be. Over the course of its 50-hour story, Red Dead Redemption 2 tells a memorable tale, with incredibly written characters that are constantly put through the grinder in heartbreaking ways. In this feature, we'll talk about some of these saddest character arcs, stories, or single moments in the entirety of the game. There will be major spoilers ahead for Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. SADIE. SADIE's journey from being a helpless and grieving widow at the beginning of the game to transforming into a fierce, capable, and at times terrifying gunslinger over the course of Red Dead Redemption 2 is perhaps one of the best arcs for a character in the game. And while it's gratifying to see her learning to deal with her loss on her own terms, it also has some pretty depressing implications. Arthur's statement to her near the end of the game, when he tells her that both himself and her are more ghosts than people, rings very, very true, because that loss is what defines SADIE, and we'll get back to Arthur's side of this in a bit, and will always continue to do so, leading her to do things she wouldn't ordinarily have deemed appropriate had her husband not died. Eagle flies. The hardships of natives in the face of advancing civilization is something that plays a very important role in the final third of Red Dead Redemption 2, bringing Eagle Flies, the son of a native chief, to the forefront as one of the more prominent characters of that arc. And though Eagle Flies is presented as an angry and brash character, he is also shown to be loyal to his people, his ideals, and not to mention the fact that he saves Arthur's life at one occasion. When he does do that, though, he ends up getting fatally shot himself. It's a heartbreaking scene because it's not a simple sacrifice. We already know by that point that Arthur is about to succumb to his deadly sickness, and we can see from his point of view that the fact that Eagle Flies, a young and healthy man with much potential, sacrifices himself to save him feels like a waste, especially in light of the immense respect he holds for his father. Rain's Fall. Speaking of Eagle Flies' father, Rain's Fall is the second of two main characters of the arc surrounding the natives and Dutch's machinations for manipulating them, and quickly cements himself as one of the best characters of the game. And while he doesn't die, like so many other characters in Red Dead Redemption 2, the fate he meets is still truly depressing. His people are lied to and cheated repeatedly, losing their land, their identity, and everything else, while by the end, he also ends up having lost his last son, after he repeatedly tells him to stop his fight against the army. If and when John meets Rain's Fall in the epilogue, it's clear to see that is a loss he still hasn't recovered from, and seeing who is perhaps the purest and most honorable character in the entire game suffering from such a fate is truly depressing. HOSEA. HOSEA acts as a vital figure in the dynamic of the Van der Linde gang. Not only is he the wise, older figure most people, especially Arthur, look up to, he is also an excellent advisor to Dutch, the man who keeps him sane and grounded. When he dies during the gang's attempted robbery, his loss is keenly felt, and it's easy to buy into how much that has affected every member of the gang. Most of all, it is with his death that everything starts to go wrong. With nothing and no one to keep Dutch grounded anymore, he starts unraveling, and the vacuum left by HOSEA spells truly disastrous consequences for every single member of the gang. HAMISH SINCLAIR. HAMISH SINCLAIR isn't a character featured in the game's main story, so there's a chance that many might not have even known who he is, which is a real shame because he is flat out one of the best characters in Red Dead Redemption 2. His side questline is simple, and the missions themselves aren't too special, but it is through the strength of his character and the writing for him and his interactions with Arthur, or John as the case may be, that every single one of his appearances is made so memorable. Which is why when, at the end of his questline, Hamish dies while hunting a boar, it truly comes across as a deeply sad moment. LENNY. Years from now, when people talk about the most memorable moments in Red Dead Redemption 2, they'll speak of the mission where Arthur takes Lenny and Valentine. It sets up Lenny as an excellent character, which is something that the game continues to do subtly throughout the hours that follow. During the botched robbery, HOSEA is of course the biggest loss suffered by the group, but Lenny is also among the people that fall, and that is a devastating loss, especially for Arthur, because in every single one of his interactions with Lenny, it's easy to see how much he likes the young man. Lenny may not have been a senior gun in the gang, but it was easy to see that given the right circumstances, he could have gone far. That, coupled with just how good of a character he was, made his sudden death a sad, sad moment. Sean. From the very first moment we meet Sean in the mission where Arthur, Charles, and Javier rescue him from bounty hunters near Blackwater, it's easy to see that the Irishman has an excess of personality, and he continues to display that excess of personality throughout the rest of the time with the gang. It's also easy to like him as a character, especially seeing his annoying little brother and disgruntled older brother interactions with Arthur. His death at the hands of the Greys in Chapter 3 of the game is sudden and abrupt, and comes right at the moment when he is truly starting to cement himself as one of the game's primary characters. Following his death, Arthur even mentions in his journal that he looked at Sean as an annoying younger brother, which just makes his loss that much more heartbreaking. John's future. Viewed in context of just Red Dead Redemption 2, John is actually perhaps one of the luckier ones, making it out of the gang's ordeals with his life and family intact. But knowing his fate and untimely death in Red Dead Redemption 1 gives depressing context for the events of Red Dead 2. Arthur sacrifices himself to help John get out of the life, to make sure that he and his family can lead a normal life. But we know that ultimately is for nothing, with John and Abigail both dying and Jack 2 pretty much descending into a life of violence and crime by the end of Red Dead Redemption 1. Arthur's past. We don't get to hear much about Arthur's past or about his life before the events of Red Dead 2, but the game gives us enough information to understand that he hasn't had a good life. He was, much like John, orphaned at a very young age and taken under the wing by Dutch and HOSEA. But what's truly saddening is hearing Arthur talk about his son, Isaac, who was killed, along with his mother, by robbers at a very young age, all over $10. Arthur admits that this was an event that hardened him while speaking with Rain's Fall, and that conversation lends even greater depth to an already excellently developed character. Arthur and Sister Calderon. Depending on whether or not you play through one of the game's side quests, this is a conversation that you may or may not have witnessed, but if you did, you know exactly what we're talking about. As Arthur helps Captain Monroe escape from the army, he meets her on the train station where he admits to her that he's dying of tuberculosis. This conversation, though, also changes depending on your honor level. His admission that he hasn't got long left to live and that he's afraid of what the future holds for him, as well as his grim acceptance of the fact that, given how he's lived his life, maybe his untimely death is something that he deserves. Not to mention the look on his face while he admits all of this, is something we're not likely to forget anytime soon. Edith Downs. There's something just cruel about the fact that the disease that kills Arthur is something that he contracts from a dying man while beating him to death over a small sum of money. But another depressing fallout is what it does to that man's family. Edith Downs, his wife, and their son are forced into a life of poverty, while Mrs. Downs herself has to resort to degrading acts of depravity just to make sure she and her son can get by. The side questline involving her in the final chapters of the game is one of the most memorable stories of Red Dead 2, an arc of slight redemption for Arthur, and her personal story is truly heartbreaking. Last Ride. This was the beginning of the end. After Arthur bids Abigail and Sadie a heart-wrenching farewell, he gets on his horse, puts his dusty old hat on one last time, and rides to the camp to confront Dutch and Micah, an act that he knows is probably going to be one of his last things he does in life. The ride to the camp is accompanied by an excellent, stirring song, while Arthur reminisces about the life he has led and the person he has been. It is a powerful, powerful scene, and its impact simply cannot be overstated. Arthur's horse. Red Dead Redemption 2's horse bonding mechanic proved to be a stroke of genius in several ways, but not only did it prove to lend mechanical and systemic depth to the gameplay, the game even manages to find a way to tie it in with storytelling. In the harrowing climax, as Arthur helps John escape, and we can see that he's very, very close to his end, Arthur's horse succumbs to grave injuries and dies. After spending a large amount of time with the same horse and bonding with him or her throughout the game, seeing Arthur say thank you to the dying animal in its final moments, even as bullets are flying past him, is a powerful moment. Arthur's death. Of course, this is what we have to end with. Arthur's death is perhaps the single most powerful moment we've ever witnessed in a Rockstar game, which is saying a lot. Here's a character who's developed excellently as one of the greatest protagonists we've ever seen in any game, given great depth and complexity, propped up by an excellent performance. Seeing him succumb to his sickness, which he gets from Thomas Downs in a cruel twist of karmic justice, or seeing him get executed by the despicable Micah, depending on how honorable your playthrough was, is the single most heartbreaking moments in the entire game. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.